Right. So, hi everyone. Good day. My name is Gaurav Tomar. I serve as Chief Marketing Officer for Judgement Indian Business Forum, or GIBF in short. And in my day job, I work as Automotive Industry Manager at Papworks, who are the makers of MATLAB and Simulink, which are tools used by engineers all around the world for technical computing. German Indian Business Forum is conducted in Munich every year since 2016, together with the Government of India, Bavarian Ministry of Economic Affairs, Energy and Technology, and the City of Munich, and the Confederation of Indian Industries, and OAV, the German Asia Pacific Business Association. So this year, due to the circumstances, of course, we've moved our forum to online events. And one of these event series that we have been running since April this year is In Conversation With. And today we'll be conversing with Madeline, who is from Uribe Mira. In general, we are inviting in this setting industry leaders and startup founders to learn more about in-focus topics. And today the topic in focus is cybersecurity. And which brings me to Madeline. She is on the Autocar list of 100 great women in the British car industry, and she's currently the cybersecurity innovation lead at Uribe Mira, where she's responsible for cybersecurity research program at the company. So, Madeline, welcome to In Conversation With, and welcome to German Indian Business Forum.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Really excited to speak with you.
Thank you. We are excited to have you, and we have a very interesting topic today, so I'll get on with it. So the Jeep hack from 2016, the researchers which took control of remotely took control of a Jeep, was quite scary for automotive enthusiasts. The attack on Sony in last years on their data center, and recent attack on Garmin, all these go on to show how fragile our ever so connected lives are, and that they can fall prey to bad actors at any given moment. Especially now that we are going towards autonomous vehicles, we are integrating technology more and more in manufacturing with Industry 4.0. We have more and more connected devices, and recently Gartner published the AI hype cycle, and one of the topics on the hype cycle which is gaining speed is devices as customers. So with all these topics in mind in this context, are we really ready? So that's the kind of the discussion I'd like to have with you today. Specifically, we'll focus on trends and drivers for cybersecurity in the industry in general, in tech industry, but we'll focus more on automotive and manufacturing. And then what are the how are they affecting the established value chain in automotive and manufacturing? And finally, what can people do to prepare themselves within the industry and people who are outside, so mostly consumers?
So
go ahead.
Multi-level question.
Yeah, it is. So that's just a setting of the whole conversation. And one of my first questions in that would be, so first would like to get to know you. So what brought you close to cybersecurity? What was the motivation behind you picking up cybersecurity?
Well, so I actually first started in biochemistry, but it wasn't the area that was that interested me after I came out of that. So I ended up looking at computing options. I've always liked computers. I've always played around with computers. And at some point, it took me into forensic computing, so digital forensics. And part of that urge to go into forensics was the urge to help people and to protect people. And that's pretty much what we try to do in cybersecurity. And going into cybersecurity, there was a whole world of computing, but I got into it at a time when cars and other items like IoT were just starting to be connected up at mass scale, which is where a lot of interesting things came in. That's how I got into it.
Okay. Okay. And as part of your research, what was it that you focused on? So you said that you were more interested in digital forensics.
Yeah, so digital forensics and the bit that I do is around penetration testing. So my technical specialism is in penetration testing. But as I research more and more into the automotive field, I mean, we're talking so many areas that need work. I wanted to address the question earlier where you said, are we ready? I would have to say, you know, the technical aspects are there, or they're starting to be researched, but it takes more than just the technical aspects of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has always been a very holistic kind of discipline. So not only do you need the technical experts, you need the legal experts, you need the governance aspects of it and the business risk aspects of it covered off as well. As we know with Garmin, for example, it's not just about the technical risk, but also the business risk.
True. Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the topics we'll then touch on later is I was reading recently McKinsey paper where they're calling out to cybersecurity as one of the measures of quality in automotive going forward. So we can definitely talk about that. So what is the kind of guidance or the work that you are doing with your customers on these aspects already?
Yes, so Haribamara is actually involved in ISO 21434, which is the upcoming security engineering for road vehicles. But of course, the road vehicles today are going to be are different from the vehicles that are to come in the future, especially when we're talking connected autonomous vehicles. The autonomy part is really important because the key enabler of that is AI. And at the moment, the validation verification of AI is still emerging in terms of the techniques or the methods that we want to use. And because these intelligent agents are able to make decisions on their own, we need to be really careful and think a lot on how we can make sure that they're safe and that we can guarantee their safety, or at least give a certain amount of confidence about their safety. And that's the work that our company is doing at the moment, and the work that I do as well.
Okay. So I think most of the industry folks in Europe and in Asia were following this release of UNECE guidelines, the Work Package 29. How is that going to be adopted beyond Europe? Because in Europe it is being mandated of sorts, but not in the other geographies. So how do you see?
So that's a sort of broader problem than cybersecurity. I mean, many times there are legal implications that are different in different countries or in different regions. I mean, we take privacy, for example. We can see there that it's not always joined up. For cybersecurity, I think now that we're talking about UNECE, of course, everybody's been interested in it, which is great. It's good that that's happening at a global level. And it would be good to see more of that for other things that are related to automotive. So, I mean, we see it automotive specific, but then there aren't any regulations yet for the general technologies like AI, for example, or they're only just being thought about for things like automotive manufacturing, which is more into the industrial IoT side of things. And we see, everybody agrees they need to be secured, but the way they need to be secured and how they're implemented and how strictly they're enforced differs from country to country. And I think that's a problem we're always going to see.
Okay. And that's why this statement of cybersecurity as a measure of quality kind of caught my eye, because probably this could be the driving force and the motivation for the OEMs, because the buck actually stops at OEMs, right? So that have the ultimate responsibility of putting the products out there which are secure. So,
yes, actually, at the moment it seems like the manufacturer is the one that's held liable, as it has always been in the past for a product fault. However, there's talks on how within that manufacturer, how liability can be handled. Is it with the manufacturer or is it with the developers? I mean, we've seen with the diesel, the diesel incident, that sometimes it's not just the manufacturer, and actually there are laws coming into place, or the negotiations around laws coming into place to use personal criminal liability as well. But, all this is still up in the air. We still don't know what's going to happen because we still, even technically, don't know what a mass deployment of an autonomous vehicle is going to look like. We don't know whether the AI is going to be just on board, just off board. Is it going to be communicating with each other? How do they interact with each other? How many AIs are going to be on board? Are we going to see one for controls and one for consumers, in which case two different sets of laws would apply? So there's a lot of questions there at the moment.
Especially with these blurring boundaries. So when you're using your smartphone in the car and you're using a voice assistant, which guides you, to a destination. It's all very blurry, especially because then telecom comes into play, the map provider comes into play, and is there work going on this direction to understand and define the boundaries within the space?
So OEMs do know that they require views from each of these areas of technology. So, during some of the market research that I do, you can see that they're partnering up with lots of different partners to try and address some of these issues, and also taking a good look at institutions, universities, and startups to kind of provide the technology that they need. And it's very encouraging, actually, because when I first started out in this field, everything was quite siloed because of competitive interest, which is understandable. But at cybersecurity, of course, is a joined-up thing. It's a holistic thing. And so it's interesting to see the trend towards, partnering up, making links with not just between companies, but also with governments, with standards bodies, with outside the automotive engineering discipline, like with insurers, which is all it's a step in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of the ideas which are being picked up by startups that you are excited about?
The use of artificial intelligence and machine learning is really interesting. For a long time, it was very much around how to use machine learning for the functionality of an autonomous vehicle. But of course, we can also use it to help us. And on top of that, even if we didn't use it, the criminals would find a way to use it because they obviously have the same thoughts that we do, just they have a different aim. That's a really interesting area. And it's an interesting challenge as well because cyber physical systems, which autonomous vehicles will be and Industry 4.0 is very different to just IT. So some of the challenges there, for example, being constrained systems. So machine learning can't work very well in constrained systems. We want to make sure that AI is never weaponized against us, which, is inconceivable. Whatever we can think of, they can think of as well. So there's lots of areas of interest out there, lots of research projects in that area as well.
And how would you talk about weaponizing, right? So that's let's say unintended use or abuse. So what are some kind of measures that are already being taken today? So which is not like in the future, not a matter of research, but already in practice. So what are some of the good practices already being put in place?
It's still, its use is still emergent, so I don't think there's anything out of the realms of research yet. It's very much in the realms of research at the moment. And it's good that it's being looked at in research. But, because it's still so new in the autonomous vehicle world, and it's still so, the implications are not well understood. It's very hard to see what the defensive measures might be. So, very much an open field at the moment.
Okay. So building if people are interested in coming into the space and probably because there's also a great opportunity, right? So where there is a crisis or a problem, there's also an opportunity to do some good and create value. So if companies are looking to work in this space, probably coming in with ways to define the constraints in the systems and ways to do penetration testing. That's what you've done. That's a
Or
start.
even, yeah, so, for example, we are funding research into the use of machine learning for not just cybersecurity. So we're funding research into things like scenario-based testing and the use of simulation and machine learning with simulation for scenario-based testing. We're looking at machine learning for to create more realistic simulations, for example, in sort of traffic scenarios, pedestrian scenarios, and things like that. So it's very much a broad field of research and a broad field of innovation, shall I say, rather than just research. It's bringing all that to market as well, and we have we would welcome partners in that.
Okay. So one of the challenges that I have seen and I've come across right now is that when we talk about scenario-based testing, it's difficult to define which scenarios should I be actually, what is relevant, what is not relevant, or what is, irrelevant because it is not big enough a risk. So how, and I think risk is being talked about in ISO 21434, right? So how do you connect the dots between risk as defined in 21434 and the scenario-based testing?
So it's at the moment it's very much an expert judgment, and the reason for that is because it's very difficult to measure cybersecurity. So for safety, for example, you have the basically the laws of physics helping you out. How far something might skid in wet weather, how often things might break when you're talking about strain or stress or whatever. So you have the laws of physics helping you. But for cybersecurity, you have all of that in a cyber physical system. But on top of that, you also have a sort of malicious intention, so human intention. And to measure that sort of risk, you need to know what their intentions are, what their motivations are, what their skills are, what their opportunities to create harm are. And all of that is very much subjective. It's very hard to measure objectively someone's motivation, very hard to measure objectively their skills. What's an expert to me might not be an expert to someone else, and vice versa. So that's where the difference is. So very much at the moment it's in expert judgment.
Okay, but so but in that case, if I'm able to model some of the threats or faults which are possible in my system and then simulate them at scale, that kind of safeguards me against that, right? Or not?
Yes, absolutely. So what experts do is they make a judgment based on available data. So when you have news or data or even the technical aspects of security testing, that is the basis for an expert judgment. So absolutely, a risk analysis would definitely help you prioritize your defenses and help you put them in place. And all of that also really helps in getting business buy-in, because of course sometimes cybersecurity is seen as a cost center. It's something that you have to do extra for. So this helps you kind of make the business case for it as well, which is also good.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about manufacturing.
Okay.
What are some kind of measures that are already being taken in manufacturing industry against cybersecurity? Because I think it's much bigger. It's much bigger, if not equal, a threat in manufacturing, because you have chemicals and you have all sorts of.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and the issue of the supply chain does hit automotive and everyone else as well. So this is where there's a convergence between what they call industrial IoT and IT, your traditional information technology, because of course the computing infrastructure needs to be there for you to control and automate and view data on monitoring your manufacturing base. And I would have to say there that quite a lot of the time there's two sides to it. One is the sort of computing infrastructure, which we are very familiar with in terms of securing those devices. But on the other side, it's the actual products themselves that also need security. So it needs to be on both ends. And in terms of the product security, again, it's still emergent. So there's legislation out now. I think the California IoT Cybersecurity Act was one of the first ones. But more is coming out as other regions and other areas catch up. And in fact, for example, in the EU, they're planning a certification framework specifically for IoT, amongst other things. And there are also nods towards making products more secure through sort of, for example, specific regulations like medical regulations. So in terms of legislation, it's there. In terms of the technical part and how makers and vendors of these products can make things more secure, I mean, it's a massive problem, very, very complex issue. So really, it's all about trying to build up that maturity in the same way that we did with IT, you know, making that there's documentation, there's independent testing, that when the standards come out, because there's not yet a formal standard, that it follows the standards and that when it's compliant with legislation. I think we're starting to see a bigger movement. It's not just started, it has started for a few years, but we're starting to see a bigger movement. Concentration at the moment has been on consumer IoT just because they've been more visible in terms of the hacking or the security testing or the research or demonstration. They've been more visible, but definitely they're within the scope of what governments would consider for legislation in the future, very much so.
Okay. And I'll definitely ask you towards the end about for your recommendations as well in terms of what are the best practices or some documents, some reading that you would recommend our audience. Talking about our audience, we already have first question, so let me read out the question to you. It's from Mario. I'd like to know from an expert perspective how well the communication protocols that are used in the vehicle network designed in terms of cybersecurity.
Okay, so here's one of the challenges with automotive and with manufacturing and with anything that requires a very long life cycle. The controller area network, or the CAN protocol, was not designed with security in mind. It was designed with robustness in mind, but they are different things. And I think it was last codified in 1993, and there's not been an update to it since then. So it's a legacy protocol, which means that it's not protected. There is work to create new and more updated protocols that are useful for security, that include security. So, for example, CAN-FD is there. We're seeing the move towards automotive Ethernet, which is adopted by cars today already, and they also have the bandwidth to support cybersecurity. But as things stand, the control area network is not very secure, and it's not just cars. It's buses, lorries, ships. So
CAN-FD and some IP within auto Ethernet. Yeah. Okay. Then broadly there are two aspects that we've been revolving around. We've touched on the process aspects and how regulations. So regulations are no substitute for processes, right? So the processes have to be in place. The regulations can only guide if the process is in place. So what are the processes that are in place in manufacturing and in automotive to build in cybersecurity?
So they would follow probably 21434 quite closely for the automotive side of things. Obviously, for manufacturing.
But that leaves out autonomous vehicles completely, right?
Yes, it does. There aren't any yet for autonomous vehicles, and that's partly also because we don't know what a mass-deployed or mass-produced autonomous vehicle will look like. I mean, it goes beyond even cybersecurity. You know, for example, we don't know what materials they'll use, what kind of crash tests will happen. If you have 4 people sitting around instead of 2 by 2, obviously the tests will be different. The restraints will be different. How you get in and out will be different. So beyond cybersecurity, we actually don't know what a mass-produced autonomous vehicle will look like. Also, there's emergent behavior when you're talking about intelligent agents interacting with each other, and there's plenty of examples of that in research. So even beyond cybersecurity, it's very difficult to say what processes should be in place because it's so different. Let me give you an example. There's also this convergence between the tech industry and the automotive industry, as we know. The automotive industry uses a V model, but the tech industry generally doesn't use a V model. They probably use something like Agile, for example.
Yeah, I've heard about Agile.
Yeah. Or Kanban or Scrum, there's loads of different ones. And the convergence of those processes is not well understood. How does Agile fit with a V model or a waterfall model? And until we can answer that, and or until it grows organically at a point where it's mass produced, it's very difficult to say what processes should be followed. But today, the best guidance we have are those standards and or best practice from IT. But as I said, IT is different, different to cyber physical systems, so there's only so much learning we can bring across.
Yeah. And that brings me to the second part, the people part. So the two topics that kind of encompass our conversation, the process and people. So if we focus now on the people part of cybersecurity, and the fact that a bad actor could just use social engineering techniques to get legitimate password or legitimate access key out of a person, and you might have the most secure cybersecurity mechanism, but you can't defend against just plain simple people skills. And that's the thing you were talking about, right? So the metrics for motivation, how do you?
Yeah, so people is a really important part of the cybersecurity chain. It's an old saying that the problem lies between chair and keyboard, and that humans are the weakest link. But actually, humans can also be the strongest link, because they're able to think like a human. I mean, attackers are human. At the end of every attack is a human. So the defense needs to be a human as well. Machines only do what they're programmed to do. Even if they have machine learning in them, that is still kind of dominated by an algorithm. So we need to ensure many levels of people. So first, we need to ensure that the skills are there. So for example, at the Mara Technology Institute, we try and focus on specific skills like cybersecurity that would really help them in the future. Apart from skills, you also might want to think about the threats and the threats that are posed by people rather than the threats that are posed by machines. As I said, attackers are humans, so we definitely want to consider that. And the last bit around people is that, not everyone's super technical, not everyone's a cybersecurity expert. And there's actually a new field of research called, or not new, but new in the automotive industry, called usable security, which is, how you would impart a certain amount of cybersecurity knowledge and or how you would have them respond to a cybersecurity incident without being a super technical cybersecurity expert. And this is actually really important because in an autonomous vehicle in the future, if you think about it, probably there won't be an operator. There might be an AI to interface, or there might be a remote operator or a remote person to help you. But in the actual vehicle, it will only be occupants, which means that if something happens, if there's a cyber attack or there's a safety issue even, how do we communicate with them for them to react in the right way and not have them panic or have them react in an unsafe way by mashing buttons or whatever it is that they're using.
Yeah. So that's where the whole school of thought of having monitoring services which are running on redundant systems they'll monitor and kind of kick in as a autonomic response of the system itself. So,
but at some point, for example, if you need to tell them to vacate the vehicle, you still have to communicate to them in some way, which means that A, you need to build up trust, which is a cybersecurity issue, but also B, this usable security means that it's usable by everybody, by someone who's elderly, someone who's blind, someone who's a child, and it needs to encompass all of those for them to be safe and to build trust in an autonomous vehicle.
Okay, that's. I mean, it's. I think there's. This is a lot of fodder for people to chew on and do their own further reading. Asma asks, what is the role of a driver in securing the connected cars? And I think we were kind of talking about this, right? So how does a driver or a rider um, kind of what are the measures that they could take to ensure security? And that's what you talked about, usable security.
So I would say, follow the best practices of IT and follow the best practices of digital hygiene. Don't stick USB sticks in your car, random USB sticks in your car. Don't connect your car to networks that you don't know, the same way that you wouldn't connect your phone or your computer to a network that you don't know. Make sure that it stays updated as much as possible. So very much what you would do to ensure basic digital hygiene for your own computer or your phone, because that's what cars are becoming. They're becoming, it's an old saying, but they're becoming computers. I say becoming, they are computers on wheels. So much is based around software now. So yeah, I'm afraid at the moment that's all a user can do, because a lot of it is behind the hood. A lot of it is the manufacturer's responsibility to secure, things like securing their supply chain, things like ensuring that best design practices are followed. That's on the manufacturer side. But yeah, on the user side, it's very much what you would do for your phone or your computer anyway.
Right. And I was finding, because I had this term written down as one of the things that I wanted to ask you. I had written down cybersecurity hygiene. I was like, okay, what do you recommend? I think that I picked up this question because this was exactly in that line. There's one more. I think we just talked about it. So active versus passive diagnostics. So the monitoring services, and so do you see one being more useful than the other, or what are the use cases for both of these? The question from Shailesh.
As in active and passive monitoring?
Active and passive monitoring, yeah, for diagnostics. So yeah, go ahead.
I think because there are so many layers of things that can go wrong, we should aim to, within the bounds of, with consideration to privacy, we should ensure that we monitor in a 360-degree kind of way. Because obviously attacks and incidents can come from all sorts of things, or they can come from a chain of things. Not so much in a car, but, for example, there are things that you may not consider safety critical that could end up being safety critical, end up violating privacy in a very bad way. So an example of that is, I don't know if you know the shopping chain Target in America. Their payment systems got hacked, but the attackers came through the air conditioning system, because at some point the air conditioning system hadn't been segregated from the payment systems. Now, no one would think, well, why would people want to go through an air conditioning system? There's nothing of value there, but actually the attackers did find something of value. And that's what we have to consider in a car, more so a connected car, is that attackers are able to put a chain of events together. So therefore, our defenses must also be multi-layered, and monitoring in all sorts of ways possible is part of that defense.
True. Yeah. My car has a LTE SIM card in it, and it's always connected to my cell phone. So yeah, I know what you mean. And there was this coffee machine attack as well, right?
Yes.
All right. Then I think we have one more question on intrusion detection. Will active diagnostics like intrusion detection help against the people aspect that we were talking about earlier, so the social engineering aspect?
So intrusion detection at the moment is very much a very popular topic in cybersecurity. There are a couple of challenges with it. So first, for example, is whilst you're driving, not so much with maybe fully autonomous vehicles, but where there is a driver, driving behavior is very individual. So intrusion detection might learn that one driving behavior, but what if a car is shared? What if it's a fleet car or a company car? In which case, there's a lot of issues with how it recognizes what's an intrusion, what's an anomaly. However, saying that, it is a very important part of security, and it's a problem that we need to work on, because intrusion detection is often the first line of defense. It's often the first time you notice something's happening. And as we know in cybersecurity, the faster your response is, the better the outcome at the other end. So yeah, very, very much an important part of it.
Yeah, good point. So we focused a lot on what can go wrong and why and how to save it. Let's focus a bit of time on the positive aspects. So for the younglings listening in, for people in the university right now, or also professionals who are looking to probably pick up careers in cybersecurity, what are some kinds of opportunities that are existing right now in this space, and what do you see 5 years down the line?
So if you're completely new to this area, then I would say there's loads and loads of online courses that are free, offered by famous universities that you can take, risk-free to explore the area a little bit more. I'd say that cybersecurity is a huge field. It needs more than just technical people. As I said before, it needs the lawyers, it needs the insurers, it needs the business people, it needs the strategy and governance type people. And even technically, you have engineers, cryptographers, mathematicians, you have pen testers, malware analysts, digital forensics, police officers. So it's massive. Cybersecurity undercuts everything. So you will definitely find an area that you're interested in. If you're interested in research, there are PhD opportunities available. At Mara, for example, we fund a cohort of currently 5 PhD students in cybersecurity, and many other companies are doing it too. Research is a great way to be at the forefront of the field, especially where everything's still emerging. We still don't know anything, and everything's not well understood. So there's an opportunity to contribute there. Or if you wanted to contribute technically, then just get involved. Ask questions and attend seminars like this, because it's a really interesting field, and there's always something happening. And the criminals are creative, so why can't we be? It's a very creative field as well.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for that. And an advice for some young entrepreneurs out there: what are the opportunities for them to evaluate and probably some unsolved problems?
Yeah, so plenty of.
We've only talked about problems, but
yeah, plenty of pain points to solve. I mean, for example, we have a skill shortage, as we know, in cybersecurity. In fact, we have a skill shortage in engineering. We have a skill shortage in automotive engineering, and we have a skill shortage in cybersecurity. Never mind automotive cybersecurity or autonomous vehicle cybersecurity. So anything that helps with that skill shortage, like automation, would be really helpful. And or plenty of problems to be solved in supply chain security. How do we make sure the parts really are what they say they are? How do we make sure there are no counterfeits? How do we make sure there are no malicious circuits, the malicious boards, the malicious components? And even if you weren't involved in the manufacturing or the engineering part of it, the computing infrastructure itself has plenty of challenges. How do we secure things in the cloud? How do we secure and make sure that things remain safe when we're controlling robotic arms and all the rest of it? Plenty of things out there to be solving problems for. So all the young entrepreneurs, take a problem and solve it, and it'll be good.
Okay. So this opens a lot of additional questions, but we're really falling short of time. So I was noting down some of the things you said. You talked about skill shortage in engineers who are in the industry today. You talked about skills also for cyber physical system engineers. And then you're saying that how to make parts. So how to ensure that the supply chain is kind of validated. So we know the parts or the software or hardware that we're using is coming from a trusted supply chain. And finally, the computing infrastructure, that which goes back to the IT skill set, right? Because for the computing infrastructure, there's the infrastructure part, which is then the responsibility of the provider, it could be a cloud provider, AWS or whoever. but then everything else within the cloud is actually the user's responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah. So how to set policies, how
Yeah.
to design roles.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
And the design of any software architectures, all that. Absolutely.
Okay. So there's a matching question. I'd like to squeeze that in. This is from Akash. We are working on prototyping an AI network security system, which provides higher network security with negligible human interface and overcomes the manual entry problem, as well as automated mitigation of attacks to create a secure digital space. So probably it was more of a promotion than a question, Akash. I thought there's a question somewhere, but no. Okay, good to know, Akash.
I have a comment on that, and I think it's great that we're automating quite a lot of these processes, but I see AI and machine learning as a partner, so they augment what we do or take away all the very manual parts, whilst the human can then look at and concentrate on the very complex parts of a cybersecurity problem. And yeah, it's very much I see in the future for any kind of AI really is that they will augment what humans do rather than replace.
Right. Yeah. Augment rather than replace. I think that's going as a headline of this video. So Madeline, we are at the end of our stipulated time. Thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you for all the insight that you've given us today. Everyone, please go on our website to follow what we are doing, to keep a tab on the next events that are coming up. Today, we talked about the problems that exist, the unsolved problems that are there, some of the processes and regulations that are existing and are working, are in progress to be set up. We talked about the skills gap, not only in the users, but also in the engineering professionals as well, while they are building in cybersecurity. And Madeline also talked about not seeing cybersecurity as a cost center, rather as something which is part of the development process. So it's not something outside in, rather inside out. And you got some good ideas about what are some of the business opportunities here, maybe in training engineers on cybersecurity or doing something out there using AI and machine learning and probably detecting intrusions. Who knows? So with that, thank you very much for this very insightful conversation. I absolutely love these conversations where I have 2 or 3 pages full of topics that I'm going to then read about later in the weekend. So I hope the audience has the same effect. With that, thank you very much. Also from the whole GLBS community and the team, thank you for being here, and I hope you'll join us again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madeline. Thank you, everyone.
And take care. Bye-bye.